Hello and welcome everybody to today's live stream. We have got a really special live stream for you today. We're here live with members of the sailing team for a Q&A. We're going to get answers to your questions about the latest sailing blog. The poll is actually live now, so if you haven't voted already, please do go vote. But I totally understand if you're just waiting for this Q&A before you cast your vote. So thank you for joining us today, especially if you are out grinding your Yama contracts. P.S. We hope that this stream does not get you flattened by any meteors. We're joined today by mods Elena, Husky, and Kieren. Welcome, guys. How are you doing, and what have you been grinding in game lately? We will start with you, mod Elena.
I'm doing great. I took a little break from old school, but I came back for Yama, and it's been great. One of the people in my iron group, he spooned like all 3 pieces, so now I'm forcing him to like come and help me get my pieces as well. But yeah, it's really good.
Awesome. And Husky, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good as well. I've also been doing Yama. Phenomenal boss. Just kind of trying to practice some of like the techniques like simple fly, get ready for contracts, that kind of thing. Only 1 piece, so I've got a fair bit to go. Hoping I have enough contracts for my grind. If not, I'll be sitting in the chasm for 20k demons, which actually doesn't sound terrible, to be honest. But I definitely want Radiant Oath plate. It's like, it's a strong motivator for me. I'm going to get my Radiant Oath plate, and then I'm going to take that and do my Colosseum grind and get the Blessed Quiver. And, you know, it's just the Iron Man life of, I've set this grind to do that grind, to do that grind, just trying to get back in the swing of it.
Awesome, Husky. Lovely to hear that. And Kieren, how are you doing? What have you been grinding in game lately?
I am doing fantastic, thank you. Haven't been grinding Yama yet. Planning to. I've just actually finished my ring from Vardorvis, though. My Ultor, and that felt really bloody good to get that one done. So, moving on to the next one soon. But I've also been doing Tombs of a Mascot still. Like, I'm kind of addicted to just running 300 solo, and I really want to get the Shadow, of course, but maybe the dream will happen one day. Yama soon, as soon as my Gim mates are ready.
You mean you're not blessed with JMod RNG, Kieren?
Not quite, not quite. I had, to put it in context, my first 2 purples from Tombs of a Mascot were both wards, and I felt really happy for myself. Trust me.
I hear that's the most useful item to get first as well. Well done.
It really is.
You gotta go do Corp now, get the fortified ward ready for the Eye of Ayak when that comes out.
We actually have an arcane, so we do have one of them upgraded.
Awesome. Chat is being so lovely today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're going to go through some announcements and then we will get into your sailing questions. Just a word of warning. This is the first time that I'm actually running the live stream myself through my OBS. So if there are any audio issues, please let me know. We tried to do some tests beforehand, but yeah, just warning you guys. Okay, so ! Announcements. We have the ! Blog. If you want to take a read of the latest sailing blog yourself, use that command. You'll also be able to use ! Survey to fill out the survey and just let us know your thoughts. We're using that survey going into the next poll, so getting your feedback is still super useful when it comes to community consultation. ! Poll. Head to your nearest poll booth to vote on the latest features of sailing. This is super exciting. The latest blog has all the information you need to know and is basically what we'll be discussing today. ! Discord will take you to the official sailing Discord where we host dev Q&As, stages, as well as competitions that are going to be happening soon. And it's just a great hub for all things sailing. ! DMM. Deadman All-Stars is back for another season, so watch your favorite creators live from May the 30th to June the 8th, with the finale being streamed on our Twitch channel.
How hype is Deadman All-Stars, though? Just saying. It's been great.
It has been really awesome. Video, Solo Missions Season 2, rundown of DMM, ! Merch as well to get your Wise Old Man and Gnome Child keyrings. Finally, as well, we just wanted to give you a heads up. If you check out the game status page on our website, you'll see that RuneScape and Old School RuneScape will be taken offline for approximately 5 hours tomorrow. This is for scheduled maintenance. We're moving our backend services to a different data center. So this is your opportunity to get all the chores you need to get done within that time. You know, maybe think about clearing the lime scale from your kitchen sink, or maybe you want to catch up on today's VOD and just have a listen again. So yeah, just giving you a heads up about that. Right, now, time to get into your questions. I also just want to preface this with, we updated the sailing blog on Friday with some answers to some very frequently asked questions, but we're going to recap a few of them now. So my first question, this is to everyone, but I would like to ask, with the introduction of new resources that are coming with sailing, can players expect to get more bank space?
I can talk about this one a bit. So we immediately said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, let's do it. And then we realized, there's a reason why back when the last time we introduced more bank space that we capped it at the cap where it's at now. And that's because of, well, it's because of boring stuff. It's bank optimization, which, you know, code needs to run more efficiently, essentially, to make it compatible with a bigger bank space. And so we need to make some improvements to the bank before we can commit to doing that. And right now, we haven't actually done that investigation into seeing, like, you know, how much is that going to be optimized? Like, can we actually make it run better? And we need to figure that out first before we can 100% say, yes, definitely we're doing it. But I think if we can't make that happen for some reason, which I hope we can, I'm confident, I'm optimistic. But if we can't do it, we'll look at something else, like some other type of storage, because I'm very aware that we're introducing so many new things, and while that's really exciting, where are you going to put all that stuff? We need some place to put it. So if we can't do the bank space, we're definitely going to add some other types of storage fee. So yeah, we're addressing it one way or another.
Awesome. Yeah, I did kind of jump the gun when the question was asked and just said yes. So apologies for that. We gave a bit more clarity in the news post as well. Did anyone want to add anything to that before we move on to the next one?
Clean up your banks, come on. As much as we want to give you more storage, for sure, I bet you all have some absolute rubbish in your bank, like some item I've probably never even heard of sat in your bloody second tab.
You need to go build your treasure chest in your POH and start putting all your clue loot in there.
Chat feels called out right now, I can tell. Okay, the next question is, and this kind of feeds into the bank space issue, but why are we looking to introduce new resources rather than introduce existing resources as part of sailing? Are we worried about having a bloat of like new resources coming into the game? What are your takes on that one?
I can start if you want to follow up, Husky.
Yeah, on you go.
Just to quickly say, like, overall, I am very conscious of not wanting to bloat the game with loads of resources. We haven't always got this right with past updates either, for what it's worth. But I think it's really important. The first question to ask ourselves is, can this be achieved with an existing resource? And what's the value and purpose of making it a different resource than the ones we've already got? I think that is important. And just before I throw it to Husky, like, we are using lots of existing resources within sailing as well, firstly. But yeah, if you want to expand, Husky, on sort of maybe why the new resources in particular.
Yeah, I think there's two things that stand out to me. The first is that we're kind of dealing with the whole exploration of the world thing as with sailing. So you think, oh, what is actually out there in all these new islands for me to do? And the idea that there are, you know, untapped pieces of the world having new resources just lends itself really well to the thematic. It can tie itself from a system end back into sailing as well. If you can build the best boat with all the existing resources right now, it kind of just defeats the purpose of having interacted with the system, of having upgraded a boat with one resource to then try and find if you can get another one, etc. Namely with like wood and stuff, that becomes quite prevalent. Another one that's like kind of a bit on the softer end is more of the kind of like realism aspects, I guess. Like we could just grab, for example, an existing wood that's not being used. But is that going to make sense to be quite boat worthy? I know like you can fudge that a little bit, but to me, old school's always been about that element of realism with resources. How many of us, you know, put our hand up in class as a kid because we could answer the teacher's question that, you know, bronze was made from tin and copper, things like that. So some of the resources we're introducing are, you know, some of the, especially ores and stuff, things that are like, I don't think we covered the term, the resources we're actually introducing, have we? Like, I don't know if I should say the names. But things that will make more sense to be like a bit more water resistant, things that make sense to be used in boats, especially at the higher level. So yeah, echoing what Kieren said, we're trying to be mindful about it, but absolutely, if you guys think we're going too far, that's why we're putting this out to the players. Especially the next blog is going to cover a lot of the resources in skilling. If you guys go, hey, actually, we think that this could be a good use instead. But yeah, it absolutely needs to make sense. And we absolutely want to feed back into the idea of getting new resources as well. I think fishing's one that comes up a lot. You know, fishing and sailing are very tied to each other. We see the deep sea trawling activity. The idea that there are fish so far off the coast that you can't really get them currently is like quite an exciting thing for me personally. I've always like loved the ocean and sea life in general and the myriads of fish that exist. And I think like I feel like old school's only scratched the surface, and that doesn't mean they all need to be game-changing, you know, meta-defining fish. But I quite like the idea of just being able to fish new types of fish just in general to cook for world building and stuff.
Fantastic answer there, Husky. Elena, did you want to mention anything as well on top of that?
It's not too much to say. I guess I can expand a little bit on the existing resources because it's something we've talked about before, and I don't want that to be some sort of thing where only the people who paid attention in the first like 6 months of sailing get to know. We're definitely going to be using existing planks and logs and nails as well. Like that's going to be super useful to you in shipbuilding. So all the planks that, you know, variants that we have already are going to be useful, including new ones that we're also introducing from, well, hoping to introduce from the new trees. So that's something to look forward to. I think on resources in particular, there's a big difference between introducing something brand new, like a new type of resource that you've never seen before and never interacted with, versus expanding on an existing system that's already in the game. So taking woodcutting, for example, you're very familiar with logs, you're very familiar with planks. It's not a stretch to learn that there's a new type of log that can make a new type of plank, in contrast to like a brand new system that we're introducing. So I think building on existing skills like that is a really good way to integrate sailing with the world. And I like to think that bloat isn't too much of a problem when we're doing it that way, contra making new and like strange systems for the sake of it, right?
Absolutely.
The supply and demand stuff as well for a new skill launch is absolutely fascinating, and I think it's a very compelling thing for people to get involved with when a new skill launches, even if you're not directly looking to push and train sailing. You can imagine that if a resource doesn't exist, its supply is near zero or quite low, and then the demand for it is incredibly high, to the point where you could genuinely see someone maybe finding profit in just doing like butler making planks of new planks, because someone is paying through the nose for them, right? Like absolutely, I just need to have the fastest, best boat because I'm racing for, you know, 200 mil all, or just, you know, people with more money than sense want to be able to buy this stuff. And as a result, like the wood cutting of that will be valuable as well. But quite often we see like, you know, the plank cost price and the wood price tend to normalize. That's just not going to happen because people are just not converting them to planks fast enough to meet the demand. So yeah, there's lots of cool things as well. I think the new resources can introduce that I'm quite excited about.
Fantastic. I also just wanted to add my like 2 pence here. The fact that we're going to be going out with a poll, we illustrated in a sort of polling roadmap. The second poll is going to be talking about these new resources. We really want the community to shape and drive how far that integration goes. So we want to consult you guys on it. We want to make sure that you're happy with it. And people are free to say, look, we don't want it to go that far. You know, this is what we're happy with. This is what we're not. And then we would seek to introduce shipbuilding materials in a different way. For example, if it's not through new logs on trees, maybe you get it from shipwreck salvaging instead, and you build your ship that way. So the integration really is as far as the community wants us to push it, and not something that we're trying to like force on the player base either. Right, should I get into the next one? Silence is golden. Okay, the next question I want to ask is, will quest XP rewards from existing quests have sailing experience added to them? And in particular, players in the sailing Discord want to know if we're looking to change Dragon Slayer 1 because it involves some sailing, but it is a free-to-play quest. And similarly, would we seek to change Bon Voyage and give it like retrospective mechanics that work better with the current iteration of sailing?
We're definitely wanting to go back and have a look at quests that involve sailing, and whether that is just to give them like a narrative pass to make it work a bit better with a world that has the skill sailing in it, or whether we add mechanics. I don't know the extent of it yet. Basically, in the backlog, we just have a note to say, hey, go and revisit these things, and at the time, figure out exactly to what extent. But as for XP, it would make sense to me if you're interacting with it, with sailing as a skill in the quest, that you would get optional sailing XP. That said, on launch, we're not allowing you to use XP lamps on sailing initially, because we don't want people to like stack up a bunch of lamps or like not complete their achievement diary lamp until sailing is out, it would kind of create an unfair advantage for the people who do. So initially, that won't really be impactful at all. But I think long term, we should seek to like reward XP where there's sailing involvement for sure. One thing that's important to note here as well is that we will not add like retroactive sailing requirements for quests. So we will never say that like, you could have completed Dragon Slayer 1 without, with level 1 sailing. It's not like, future people are going to have to complete it with the sailing level. That would just be unfair, so we're not going to do that. But I could see a world where we add XP for sure.
Awesome. I feel like that kind of encompassed that, so I'll move on to the next question. This is a bit more of a spicy question, matching the spicy vibe in the chat at the moment. Is sailing integration with existing skills currently a bit too much? So from the blog, it looks like sailing currently integrates with at least 13 existing skills. The same can't be said for other skills in the game. How do you feel about that statement?
I think there's a big difference between integration and content that's enabled as a result of doing sailing on the other end. Construction is very highly integrated with it. And then you've got, smithing to make some of the parts that you construct, that kind of thing. There's some magic integration a little bit around the surface with some of the boat, like teleport to boat spell and stuff. But for the most part, it really is just there's additional content that's on the island, and sailing is the vessel to get there. So to me, I wouldn't see that as integration. I would see that as more just here's some standard content. Obviously, it's like kind of gated behind the skill as opposed to necessarily being integrated with it, and that's something we're very much towing the line between what feels right and what feels wrong. If everything suddenly gets a new best training method and a new best money-making method locked behind sailing, that's going to feel really bad, because it just becomes, hey, what's the most efficient thing to do on a new account? Oh, it's to train sailing to get access to the real content. Like, no, that would just be terrible. So there's an amount of integration that feels good, as far as, we want sailing to feel like it's a part of the game in the world. It links with other skills and interacts with other things. But we're very much towing the line between what kind of activities are going to be on those islands, what kind of XP rates, GP rates, how those resources are used, where it sits in a player's journey. At what point would they go, actually, yeah, I'm going to go train 40, 50 sailing to go do this thing, and then I'm going to, after doing that thing, move back onto land to do this other thing. We don't have a lot of concrete answers for that. I believe the next blog is going to have a lot of that kind of information, but I thought it would just be worth highlighting that we're very aware of the sentiment of sailing's required for everything, and that's something we're actually looking to avoid as well. But at the same time, it can't just be isolated to its own thing on the sea either, because then no integration would be a pretty bad thing for the game as well. So I thought there was a difference between, integration versus being unlocked by it, two different things. And then also we know the extreme end of everything being locked behind it.
100% a sweet spot to aim for. The skill should be integrated. It should enable things, and other skills do that to some extent. It can't do it. It can't do none of it, because then it feels like an isolated, separate part of the game. And it can't do too much of it, because then sailing's very dominant in the meta of which order you should do things in. And I think zooming out from sailing, Old school is all about a game where you make decisions constantly about what you want to progress, what skill to train, should you go do a quest, what order do you do them in, and it's a complex problem. Like, there's no obvious, most efficient path. Everyone makes their own journey through the game, and that should continue to be the case in a post-sailing world as well. I think the thing that feels slightly different is, for the most part, when you unlock new content for other skills, especially when it's world-based, it's often done via quests. So, like, in that sense, what I'm saying is, if you want to do, what's a good example of something like in Prifdyness, you need to do Song of the Elves. Song of the Elves has a level 70 requirement in a whole bunch of skills. It's just done via a slightly different formulation, but still, you progress to 70 smithing so you can get access to Prifdyness. And then you can go and do Zalcano, you can go and do blah, 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 right? The game's structured in that way. Sailing's not terribly dissimilar in that regard at all. And in fact, obviously, the quests are also coming as part of sailing as well. That also contribute to that.
I think as well, like, some of it is just a guessing game, and that's why we're putting these blogs out for feedback. You know, when we think about, like, we're going to introduce a new hunter activity, and we go, okay, well, you know, it's really good at XP, but it's really bad at GP. And players go, actually, we really don't want a meta training method locked behind sailing. Okay, well, what if we lower the XP, but we make the resource more valuable? Okay, well, is that okay, or is that also not okay? There's a lot of feelers out there we're going to kind of put out there with the new blog to see how people feel. You know, would they rather it was something more bespoke, like a mini-gamey hunter unlock on an island, as opposed to a skill training thing, as opposed to another thing? We've really never been in this position of having content unlocked in this way, so, you know, we're going to put our best foot forward. We've got a few NDA players we're running it by in the background and getting feedback on, but ultimately that's why we put these blogs out and why everything is still polled. You know, players say, hey, we don't like this kind of content that you propose, but we also really like this kind of content. It helps refine where we're sort of looking at and give us ideas of where to move on with sailing, because like, sailing is very much going to be a long-term thing as well. You know, we'll have the initial launch, you know, you're going to get a part of the sea, but new stuff is going to be added to sailing throughout its lifetime. So, you know, the direction of these blogs and the feedback that you guys give will probably direct a lot of the future sailing content in the future. You know, we'll have all these rules of, okay, this is the kind of content you should have on an island that's locked behind sailing versus the content that's not. You know, we have a good handle on, for example, what a boss or a raid should do in our game, or what a quest should unlock or not unlock. We don't really have that same sort of, like, I guess, answer for sailing yet.
Awesome. I'm personally really looking forward to seeing the feedback we get on the next blog. I think that's where we're going to have really good discussions with the community on what they like, what they don't like, and you'll be able to provide a bit more concrete feedback about the specific things on islands, hopefully, that you want and that you want changed. Right, let's move on to the next one. This is a more fun question, but I don't know if you guys saw, there was a popular player suggestion that made it to the top of Reddit to have a spot for your POH by the beach. I wasn't entirely sure if this was just a reskin for your POH or a new location that you would be able to put your POH in. But I wanted to talk about it. Like, what do you think of the suggestion? Do you like it? What are your thoughts?
I think it's so cool. It's really cool. Yeah, it's kind of the dream destination, isn't it? Or like your dream location for your house. It comes with a few challenges, like if we're actively considering adding it. Like, currently we don't, like, the surrounding area around your house is just like the void, right? So we need to do some improvements there and try to make it look like the sea instead. Yeah, overall really cool idea though, for sure.
Awesome. And will you be able to have a port in your POH if you have your house in a waterside area like Remington?
I don't think we've ever had a room that you can only build based on the location of your house before. So that would certainly need to be some infrastructure work. And I think, you know, be interested to see players' thoughts on that. Would they want, you know, all rooms to always be built by all houses, or would they be open to, like, perks of having your house in Assidious versus having your house in Remington? I think that it's certainly an idea though to be able to launch your boat from your house. I guess we just need to figure out where that actually is and what the benefit is. Because why would I go to? Is it because like the dock at Remington is so far away, but I put it in my house instead, so now I'm going to launch off that?
If
Yeah, I
that's
don't
the case, like I would rather just have a house portal on an island very close to the dock. It would
Yeah, it feels simpler.
make it a lot simpler, right? Because it gets weird as well, because sailing happens in the overworld, but your house is in an instance. It's like no matter what, you have to teleport somewhere else, or like like move between overworld and instance. So I'm not quite sure what that would look like either.
Yeah,
You
it'd be
have like a
weird to put.
portal on the ocean.
It'd be weird to put you on your boat in your house only to then teleport you to the mainland. It almost feels like I want a gangplank in my house that I click on that at the same time as putting me on my boat also teleports me to a place on the world. And then you sort of argue, like, as you said, like, is that not very similar to just having a house portal near a dock in the first place?
Yeah.
I want the dream, though, Husky. I want the dream. I want to see my boat parked up next to my house, like. But who knows? One day, right? Like, this is the sort of thing that I think it's great to dream of, and maybe this is something we do explore and do solve in the future. But like right now, the most important thing is we get the core skill in a great place and get that out to you, and then what comes down in the years to come, who knows?
That's always been a big problem with sailing, I think, is it's not, oh, I really wonder what we can do with sailing. It's more the opposite problem. I've seen so many cool ideas that you could do with sailing, and our challenge has been, God, like, we can't just be like working on this till 2040 doing every single cool idea. What are the best, most cool ideas that we're going to do for launch? And then make sure the system is in place for those cool things to keep coming year on year as, new content gets added to the game.
But there's also a level of like just what is expected, like what does sailing need to have, and then what is the cool stuff, right? Like, what does sailing need? Well, it needs to have boats. That's obvious. It needs a way for you to get on and off that boat, so the gangplanks is our solution to that. It needs places to go, and that's the islands that we're polling now. But beyond that, like, the sea is wide open. Like, we can do lots of cool stuff out there. But yeah, it's just like how we prioritize work, really. Like, we identify things that it definitely needs, and then on top of that, we add some cool stuff. And then we see, like, okay, when is it, how much cool stuff do we add before we release it? Because as Husky said, we could technically just add infinitely, but at some point it needs to go out as well.
Absolutely. I did see a lot of comments when I published this latest blog, like, wow, sailing has so much content already. The feedback from the alpha was largely very positive from the survey results that I saw. So I'm really happy with that response. I have seen a couple of people in the chat ask about the max cape. I wanted to address that really quickly. I'm planning on publishing a official response, like official update on that in the next blog that we publish on sailing. So keep an eye out for that. That won't be covered in today's stream because I want to get it in a news post first. But I just want to let you know that I see your comments and it will be answered and addressed. Okay, moving into deep sea trawling questions now. Deep sea trawling is a hybrid sailing and fishing training method that was mentioned in the latest blog. It's actually something that you can vote on now in game. So my first question is, are the resources such as the new fish that you get from deep sea trawling going to be locked only behind that specific activity, or can you see them added to existing loot tables across the game?
For launch, we're probably going to have it just be from the activity itself. I think we certainly wouldn't want to just add it to existing drop tables across the game and add a ton of new resource streams. But we would probably be more open to adding them to new drop tables and resources that were part of, like, sailing, for example. I think the problem you sort of have is if you're trying to, like, there's two sides to it. The first side is, oh, well, now you're forcing everyone to do the activity to get this really cool resource. We hate doing that. And I think Iron Man particularly can have that sentiment, even if maybe I don't personally agree. I think that there is also the sentiment that, like, okay, well, if how would I put it? like players, I guess, are kind of accustomed to getting all their resources through doing other content if they want, even if you got most of it from doing this activity. I think the thing is just like erring on the side of caution, though. If you suddenly add it to so many things and you're trying to weigh up, you know, okay, well, it's 30-40% from this, I'm guessing based on how many players are probably going to interact with it versus more, it doesn't give you as easy like sort of a control over monitoring that as time goes on. So I think it's probably much safer on launch to just say they come from trawling, obviously assuming players vote them in, everything's followed and stuff, from trawling only, and then sort of look to it as time goes on, and just sort of review. Because I think like the worst thing you could do is introduce something, which we might get to talk about later. A big pull for trawling is making these very sort of these very not powerful, these reasonably strong resources that people are going to want. Like these fish are going to be things that people are going to want to buy and consume and use, which would be really cool to add a new activity to skilling that can earn some money. Something that players talk about a lot is, hey, like, why can't my skilling be profitable? So, you know, we want gathering these resources to provide a reasonable amount of money. And then it doesn't matter because the boss that you introduced is just the thing that's dumping them into the drop table because everyone's doing the boss. And then people go, oh, all the resources are now worth nothing from the activity and nobody does the activity anymore. That would be the worst case scenario. And I think if you added both resource streams at the same time, that is a more likely outcome.
Thank you, Husky. Any more to add on that one?
Yeah, I want to add a little bit that I've heard, because I know that the argument against what Husky just said is like, yeah, but I enjoy bossing, but I don't like skilling. I think that might be true for, well, I'm not going to tell you what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy in the game, but I think it speaks to how the current landscape looks like in the game, where a lot of the PVM stuff is more advanced. It has more depth than a lot of the skilling stuff. But it doesn't have to be that way. Like, we can make more interesting skilling activities that maybe makes them, you know, more appealing than bossing. Maybe that's a stretch. Maybe we're not quite ready to go that deep yet, but I thought that was like an interesting way of thinking about it, is just, you know, where is this player coming from? Like, where is that feedback coming from? It's probably just because they don't want to do skilling. They want to do the stuff that they do enjoy, which is bossing, and they want to get their resources passively through that. So yeah, just some. I don't really have a clear answer for like how to solve it, but I do think that there's a lot more that can be done with skilling to make that a bit more interesting. And the more interesting the activity itself is, the less bad it is that the resource is exclusively coming from that.
Well said. Okay, will deep sea trawling be a viable way of training sailing if you are not a fan of the existing ways of training sailing? And coupled with that, what do you think is going to be the planned ratio of fishing to sailing XP for deep sea trawling?
I don't actually know, and that might sound like a really stupid thing to say, but I'm going to try and explain why I don't know. So first of all, I would say that the XP for an activity is usually the thing that you could sort of talk to later. But if I was coming out with a new fishing hunter training method right now, I'd probably have a pretty good idea for, okay, well, here's the current meta of everything. The problem is we don't really know the meta of everything for sailing, and we've never really tackled the idea of, you know, skilling on a boat before. I've talked to a bunch of NDA players, and some of them have said, I really want this to be primarily sailing and very small amounts of fishing, and to go for the alternative training method stuff. I've seen other people go on the flip side and go, actually, it'd be really nice if this was not a competitive, but like a reasonable fishing training thing. You know, I'm primarily doing fishing, and I got some sailing XP on the side. I've just not seen a consensus, and that's where I might go to the chat and, you know, to you guys, the community, and say, hey, what do you guys think, and what would you like? Where would you like it to sit? Because the safe one is like, oh, it's 50-50, but then sometimes 50-50 doesn't really, like, you know, tickle anyone's sort of fancy, I suppose. You know, it doesn't satisfy anyone who wants sailing or fishing XP. And the truth is, it just might not be good at XP, period. And it's all about the resources. I think one of the things to think about any activity is the more you juice up its XP, the less like GP it kind of has to be balanced around, because everyone's doing it for the XP, so way more of the resources come in, so the resources are suddenly worth less, and there's that dynamic as well. I mean, you're certainly going to be on your boat doing it, so there's an element of sailing that's part of that. It's just a really hard one to answer. I think the thing I did see consistently, though, from our NDA players, and it's something that joint skilling kind of has struggled with in the past, is not to make it greater than 1/8 EHP is kind of the problem, because then it's just always efficient to do this. So at the absolute most, you're probably looking at like 70-80% of an EHP, if not even lower, especially if you're expecting these resources to be profitable. I've been a very big fan of Kieran's had like an image he's shown us designers a lot, where he's like, here's the juice that an activity is, and it's like on one bar it's like, here's the intensity of the activity. The more intense it is, the more juice you have to reward players with. And then there's that split of, okay, well, how much of that is being split into XP and how much of it is into GP? And you can have something that's really low intensity, but as a result it's like maybe middling to slightly low on XP and very low on GP, or maybe it's no XP but reasonable GP. But if it's really intensive, suddenly it can be okay in both or really great in one. It's not really an answer, I suppose. I don't know the answer to this, because I mean, really, I can change the XP the day before launch and a player wouldn't know any different. But it also is probably fair to players that they want to know for the sake of evaluating the piece of content that we're releasing, so yeah, I it's kind of a cop-out answer, but hopefully that explains why it's a little bit more complicated and nuanced. I'm certainly interested to hear, maybe there's a Reddit thread when I wake up tomorrow morning about being like, here's why I think sailing should be, or deep sea trawling should be a sailing training activity and not a fishing one. And maybe there's another Reddit thread that supports the other one, and maybe those would be a good read to help sort of get us to an answer. But yeah, I definitely think that the more fishing XP it gives, the more it's like way safer to make it more lucrative on sailing XP, because that's another thing that exists in the game. Whereas the more competitive it is with fishing, like the more it can sort of trample on other methods at the same time. But I mean, I don't know. I really don't know.
Awesome.
Love a good husky ramble.
Me too.
It was a good ramble. Like, I think it nails all the points, and like, these are decisions for us to make when we have more information. I think the key thing is we know most of the joint training methods in the game. They have problems. Either they're completely irrelevant or so dominant. And for example, I hate the fact that so much of early game agility, it's efficient to do barbarian fishing and then skip all the early agility grind. I don't think that's good for the game. I mean, it feels good that I don't have to do as many agility laps, so I do it, but I don't think it's good.
The interesting part about barb fishing is it does that by and it's the amount of juice they gave agility was so small, yet it still impacted the meta so much. It's kind of crazy.
I do have a question. I wonder if we can skip to it. It's just a couple of questions later, but I'll ask it now because we're on the topic already. How far are we actually looking to impact the meta with sailing?
I kind of touched on this earlier, but saying like, it would be really bad if every skill had a best training method locked behind sailing, and it might even be bad if even 4 or 5 had a best training method. I think, for example, one of the safer ones, the two sort of safe-ish ones in my head are sort of woodcutting fishing, where I'm not saying here are the best training methods, but certainly, we're going to want players to engage with the rosewood tree cutting activity. Spoiler, there's a tree called rosewood. It'll be in the next vlog. Because that will be the thing that is the resource to make the high-level boats, so we probably want that to be quite an engaging activity that people can look to. Oh, I'm going to train my woodcutting to level to do rosewood. Does that look more like redwoods or magic or use, or I don't really know the answer to that yet. We can talk about that in the next vlog. And we probably but there's probably room for fishing to get a lot of love with sailing. Just like I said, that they're quite thematically linked. We're on the sea. I think anything else, we're probably going to be a bit more on the conservative side than anything else. Even things like Hunter and stuff, it's probably mostly going to be like sort of niche resources. I think we also want to be very mindful of construction XP. It's something we've talked a lot about internally. You're making boats with a lot of planks, and if that's something really close to a bank, and those planks are the same XP you build on your house, if we suddenly made construction like 2 mil an hour instead of 800k an hour, is probably not a good thing. But also players, there's a balance there between an expectation of, I'm going to use all these oak logs and oak planks, they give like a third of the XP. That's not good. So there's things we need to look at there. But I'd say, like, if you were worried about skills, like, not worried is the wrong word, but we're probably looking at like construction, woodcutting, fishing, I guess, are the 3 that are most likely to be impacted with the sailing. but we're very much trying to be conservative where we can. It's much easier for us to go, actually, we were kind of a bit too safe on launch in hindsight. Everyone's complaining that, you know, the construction is terrible. Let's just bump it up by another 20-30% to be reasonable. A good example of something very recently actually was bonfires, where we were very scared about the whole AFK fire making thing. So it was like 33% XP on forestry. Now we've put a poll out, and that's now the same XP as any other log, because it's, you know, fine to be AFK. It's really easy to tune XP values later, but we'd rather not be in the position of having to release things over buffed and then like panic nerf them, and then everyone who's like, you know, like I couldn't get to play before the weekend, so I didn't get to, you know, experience all the fun XP. Obviously, like hit or miss on an update whether we land on one side of the coin or not, and sometimes our calculations are wrong. But all I can talk to is our intentions, I suppose, more so than what we actually deliver.
I think it's a good chat to have, regardless, right? Like, I know that some people don't want to see massive changes coming with sailing. Other people feel like it's a new skill, it needs to sort of shake up the meta a bit more. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit more context. And as always, we will be really receptive to feedback. We did confirm there will be a beta as well, where you can playtest some content, and we'll try to make sure that you get as much consultation as possible when we're polling all of this stuff. Back to Deep Sea. Sorry,
Elena, very quickly, just add something as well. We talked a lot about the sort of like the end game or high level meta there, but there are different ways to look at the meta, I guess. Like, as in, meta is relevant or relative to your current level, right? So there might be changes to the meta at certain level brackets in certain skills based off of like the content on islands, and we'll go deeper into that in the next vlog. But I just wanted to like mention that as something that might easily be a bit ambiguous, I guess, based on what was just said.
Absolutely. Okay, what is the design reason for making this Sonar Orb take a facility slot to use? The Sonar Orb, by the way, was mentioned within the context of Deep Sea Trawling in our design blog for that, which was the latest sailing blog. Did we consider it to be an inventory item or even a cargo item instead? And are you concerned that it might end up redundant if RuneLite, for example, make a plugin for it? Secondly, are we open to changing its name, since the Sonar Orb doesn't thematically seem to fit the game? Could be something a bit more magical instead.
Easy one and the last one is absolutely open to name changes. I think like what I've done is sometimes I don't put a lot of effort into names and design documents, because if the name's really egregious, people will tell me internally and we'll come up with or provide suggestions. Naming things is one of the hardest and biggest time sinks, I swear, in this job, trying to come up with a good name. So if someone has a really good name, do go for it. But I was trying to lean into the magical side, I guess, of sailing. I think it's really easy to think that maybe something like sonar could exist in our world because magic exists in our world, and someone built a magical device that kind of mirrored what you think sonar is in our game, but like maybe it's called something else. I think that's a really fun thing to explore with sailing, as opposed to being specifically like in the nitty gritty, like medieval sort of fishing, sailing, boat days. But on to like why it was a facility. In all honesty, the Sonar Orb could get cut before launch. That's something I've only really like been thinking about over the last few days. It was something that initially, when proposed, we had like a couple more activities we were thinking about tying it to, but then that never quite worked out, and a few other things that never really fleshed out either. So the idea was it was going to be a bit more multi-purpose than just for trawling. And I think if it is just for trawling, it has a lot less use. But a lot of our early designs were kind of more along the lines of, we didn't really feel like we had a lot of facilities that you could just build as like nice to have extras. Like that feels like it would add a bit more customization to your boat. Like, well, it might be technically optimal to build this thing here, but I don't really need that on this boat. I'd kind of like this little bit of flexibility. I think that's really important for sort of boat customization, to provide those options. And as for making things redundant, I'll do a bit of a shout out to anyone who hasn't seen it. If you haven't watched Mad season shows, for example, videos, he's been good doing this sort of like unguided series as an Iron Man account. It's so crazy to me that players will just write it off and be, it's redundant because people will use RuneLite and look it up on the wiki. But I think there is a subset of players who really don't, who are just playing the game based on the information and face value. And while you might go look up and be like, oh, this is the hotspot and the meta and the plugins that I need to install and the exact inputs that I need to do on the ticks to do this action efficiently, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing if there's this thing that is nice to have that you could just build on your boat that pushes you in somewhat of the right direction if you were looking to get engaged with that activity. But for most players, it's kind of like a yeah, whatever thing. I think that there's not really any harm in adding that sort of thing to the game. Obviously, if it just doesn't feel good in practice, I could remove it for launch. But I think there is value there, even if, everyone who's engaging with these streams and on Reddit is not part of that player group I'm talking about.
Awesome. Thank you, Husky. Any more to add on that question? We've got loads of questions to go through, so I won't press you guys. Okay, this is probably another one for you, Husky. Will players have to cut one fish at a time to turn them into bait chunks, or can you implement some kind of make all option for the bait? There's a bit of concern around having to manually make each piece of bait, and that's taking a while.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I guess I hadn't really considered it too much, how much of a hassle it might be to make them in mass. I think that's something that's really easy to miss when you're designing things. That, it's really easy to be like, here's this resource and here's how you use it, and then forget about the flow to make it. I guess I'll just say I'll take that away and consider that. I never really thought about how annoying it could be, so it might be fine if you're not using a lot of the fish offcuts, but I probably do want there to be a reasonable amount of fish offcuts that are used, because we want you to have this use to chop up all the sort of lower fish to get the bait to catch the better fish. So yeah, I think we could look at ways to make cutting fish offcuts better. I just would want to be careful not to do it in a way where we're suddenly bringing up menus and making it so you can't knife fish cut sort of while doing barb fishing. I think that would be a really annoying mistake to people who enjoy that method, but I'm sure there are other options we can explore that don't break that.
Yay.
Maybe a chum chopping station at the Great Conch or something.
New tongue twister.
Yeah, chum chopping. There you go.
Will UIMs be able to store the fish from deep sea trawling in their cargo holds?
So currently, yes, any raw fish that can be caught at sea is allowed to be put into the cargo hold. And it's something that's just sort of been on the back burner as, we probably want to talk to the UIM community. It's something that's been on, I've literally got a job in our backlog that goes like, hey, take this entire list and put it to the community and review if anything is massively game breaking. Because the cargo hold is kind of like a second bank, but it's not a very efficient bank, if that makes sense. So, for example, in your normal bank, you can have a stack of, say, 10,000 shark, and that takes one inventory slot. But in the cargo hold, that takes 10,000 inventory slots, but obviously we're not giving you 10,000 slots. So it isn't going to be, I suddenly can have max stack of sharks. You're going to be weighing it up with other things, but when it's one cargo hold per boat and some of this stuff might be a problem, I think that's something where I think the safe bet is to compile the list closer to launch and then just be like, hey, Ultimate Iron players, we go out to their Discords and say, what would you recommend? It's your game mode, it's not ours. Are there things here that are kind of red flaggy to you that you would like us to do? Some of it perhaps could be very in the middle ground and require to be pulled. But as per our current implementation, yes, Ultimate Iron Man can do it. It's just something that we I've been aware of, created the job in our backlog for it, haven't got around to having that conversation, because it does feel like the sort of thing you can very easily, right at the end of the project, just go, okay, so Ultimate Iron Man can't store these things.
It's something I've asked Modden to keep an eye on as well. He plays UIM quite actively. So as we go through development, he'll try to flag it if something comes up as like, don't let us put this in the storage. But yeah, as you say, Husky, we can easily add that later on, so shouldn't be a problem. In the beta, or whatever next official playtest we have, we'll probably let you store that. So if you have a UIM, you can transfer your save over and you can go and see how that feels and tell us if it's too overpowered.
Awesome. Yep, so UIMs, we will be potentially approaching you in the future with a big list of questions. Really glad to hear Nin is on the case. I saw some love for Nin in the chat, so that's awesome. I worked on with Nin ages ago on some death pile changes for UIMs or that affected them a while ago. So yeah, really happy to work with him and sort of find a community consensus on that point. And thank you for asking the question. Right, how much reliance will players have as a group in deep sea trawling? Do you think it's going to be better to do this in a team or solo with a crew? And does having a crewmate impact your XP or your catch rates?
So having another crewmate will enable you to use 2 nets at once, and that should have an impact on both of those. We've yet to settle on sort of how much crewmates impact XP. There's the sort of nice idea that as you start off, you're just a sailor and you're doing everything by yourself, but as you level up, you're now a captain commanding a crew. So part of the way we can introduce a bit more sailing XP is in having your crew do things for you. Is sort of like, I'm now the captain. I'm still doing some stuff by myself, but I'm now doing a bit more delegating. It's an idea we're playing around with. I would say in general, though, trawling is looking to be quite multiplayer friendly. There might be some aspects where you want a couple more people to do it, but we've yet... I'm even tentative to say that. The gameplay is kind of in a very rough state right now from where we are. We didn't get very far ahead on it because obviously we want to poll it. We've started some groundwork stuff. I would just say that, like, from an intention perspective, we don't want to punish you from being there in groups. I think the idea of hop worlds to find another shoal is... It's something that is still present in a lot of our gameplay now, but I think for most new stuff we develop, it's kind of an outdated philosophy where we try to make, you know, things a bit more approachable to more players, so you can do things with your friends. So yeah, I think that kind of answers the question. I think at the very least, you're not going to be required to, you know, someone else is messing up, so you're going to be failing as a result of it. And you're certainly not going to need other people on your boat, especially as mentioned, like, we've done a lot of playtesting very recently, well, not very recently, over the last couple months or so with crewmates, and it's felt very smooth to just sort of be able to direct things and be able to control 2 facilities at once. So you're not going to need someone to steer while you operate the net. You'll have a crewmate who can do one or the other instead.
Okay, cool. What types of rewards do you get from catching the rare variant of shoals? Is it something that you can maybe display in your POH? There were a few suggestions for a POH aquarium that I thought were really cute.
Can we tell who designed, worked on the design for Deep Sea Trawling with me answering all these questions? Yeah, so I actually think the blog wasn't 100% clear on that, and I wish I'd caught that before it went out, so apologies to you, Light.
No,
there was 2 things it was talking about simultaneously. The first thing was, we thought it'd be cool if instead of, say, we actually gave a fish name, so I can say. So instead of, say, a yellowfin shoal spawning, occasionally it's now called a vibrant shoal. And a yellowfin shoal would have given you, you know, just yellowfin tuna, so it would have been good if you were catching that. But a vibrant shoal has access to, like, a split percentage of some of the fish around that level band, so you might have, like, a 2% chance to catch something that you don't have the skill to catch, as, like, a nice, I can sort of reach outside my means, get a couple of resources, but it's not going to be very efficient. That's, I thought, would just be a cool idea, something that comes up from time to time. People might, you know, spread information. Oh, there's a vibrant shoal in this world. Come here to catch it if you can't otherwise catch marlin. That kind of thing, I thought would be a fun thing to experiment with, especially because shoals at sea tend to not just be one type of fish. And I thought it would be a bit mean to say, hey, this fish can spawn and you need to suddenly have 15 levels higher to catch it. So I thought it'd be fair to just say, let's give you a little bit of this higher level resource. But obviously open to feedback and stuff. The second one it was talking about is all the actual fish variants. I think there's 6 currently in the design for deep sea trawling, are proposed to have sort of the big fish variants that you see with bass shark and swordfish. I'm a big fan of the big fish in our game. I kind of wish all of the fish had a big fish, just because I think it's kind of cool to sort of say, if I'm doing skilling and stuff, there's this other thing I can kind of work towards, like a collection log or some interesting thing happening. You know, people keep talking about the fun memes of what if we had the 1 in like 2 million chance for the blue lobster, which might be a bit extortionate, but you know, with all of these shoals, we are looking to introduce hopefully a big fish variant if players want that. I think that is coming in the next vlog, so spoilers for that one. Especially after the wonderful mod Ash rewrote that trophy system in the house, it's surprisingly easy for us to just add another fish variant. I think that's just such a cool thing that I can, I caught a really big halibut and I'm just gonna shove it in my player in house. So yeah.
Awesome. And do we have plans on releasing new best in slot tiers of food with some of the new resources that are coming into the game?
Some of the higher tiers of fish will be meta impacting, and I think it's probably safe to leave it that. I don't want to talk about what the fish are, but yes, we're looking to sort of push what fish can do to either kind of match where some of the hunter meats were in Varlamore. So keep your eyes peeled on that. We've got some, I think, pretty interesting ideas and effects there. Let us know what you think in that that blog when it goes out.
Yeah, I have seen a few suggestions in the survey so far, so I'm looking to collate the feedback that we've seen in the recent survey, present that over, and then we'll look at that, revise it, and then go out with that poll blog. So that's going to be really exciting.
I will just, I guess, caveat that to like stop panicking and stuff. We're not like bloating the heal rate massively, and we're aware that we've basically been trying to balance like, ooh, it's really nice when you've got this option for the meat that does that, we've got this other option that does this, and kind of really trying to make it a diverse meta of things you could choose between, as opposed to just blatantly, oh, well, the best stuff now comes from Deep Sea Trawling. I think we've done that fairly well, but I'm a bit biased in saying that, so again, I'll just put the call to arms, I guess. Let us know in the blogs when it comes out.
Absolutely. And obviously the community, you can tell us how you feel about it. If it comes out and you hate it, please let us know. We will always adapt to your feedback. Okay, thank you, Husky. I think I asked you like 10 questions in a row there. So I'm going to go to either Elena or Kieren on the next one, if that's all right. And you can have fun chatting with Twitch chat. They're lovely today. Can we clarify how the teleport to boat spell works? There's a bit of concern it obviates the need to upgrade your cargo space, or it might kill your sense of exploration if you can just teleport to and from your boat.
I can expand on that a bit, yeah. So there are some limitations, and we didn't really mention that in the blog, I don't think. But to be able to teleport to your boat, the boat has to be docked somewhere. So either at a dock or a mooring point. So you can't just kind of teleport away from your boat in the middle of the ocean without anything near you and then teleport straight back. That doesn't work. But if you have sort of like, docked somewhere, you can teleport back to it. And yes, it's quite powerful. But at the same time, we're balancing resources, places around the fact that you have this ability to teleport there. And one thing that's been really important to us since the beginning is that, yes, sailing is all about exploration, but when you go back to the same island for the 10th time, you're not exploring it anymore, right? Like that, at that point, it's just potentially tedium. Like you don't want to go back there and like have to sail a really long time to get back there if you want to go back consistently. So being able to teleport back there, we thought was quite a cool dynamic way to teleport. But it will come at a cost. So obviously a rune cost because it's a spell. You'll have to take up a facility spot to build a facility that enables this teleportation. And then obviously you'll have to like leave your boat there, right? So like you can have up to 5 boats, at least at higher sailing levels, and sort of like sacrificing one of those boat slots to leave it in a place that you want to teleport back to is sometimes worth it, and other times it might not be. So that's kind of up to you to decide, like, where do you want to leave your boat? Is it worth being at this island that you want to keep going back to? And yeah, I don't think it necessarily creeps on the cargo space too much either, because as Husky mentioned, like the cargo space is useful when you're out there skilling, right? But then you want to go back to a place and dock the boat before you can teleport away and teleport back to your boat. So the cargo hold is still going to be useful, and I think, yeah, like I said, we'll try to balance things with that in mind.
Thank you, Elena. So next one, I'll ask Kieren, if you're okay with that, Kieren. Do we have plans for sea monsters or combat for sailing, and can players expect to customize their boats?
You can't get boats without cannons to fire, right? Of course you will. And the main thing to give you a heads up on, you'll be able to check out more of the combat stuff in the upcoming beta.
Awesome, yay. So we can't announce a date for the beta yet, but we can announce that there will be a beta, which includes combat and crew, as well as mobile, which is really exciting. So yeah, I've seen some questions about PvP. We won't have PvP available. I did have a question planned to ask about PvP in a bit more detail, but essentially no PvP yet. We're not doing it for launch, but it is a really cool idea. Thematically, it works really well, and we have developed combat with this in mind, but it's not going to be available on launch. Significant work is needed on that. I don't know if Elena, if you wanted to mention a bit about that, because you worked a lot on combat, but I just saw the question pop up, so I was like, let's just answer that.
Yeah, I can talk a bit more about it. Firstly, I'm just really glad that we are announcing the beta because I accidentally leaked it earlier.
No, I already mentioned the
we're
beta in the news post update on Friday, so don't worry.
Good. Okay, good. But yeah, combat. So the beta, we're going to focus on both the crew and the combat part of sailing. So the beta itself is going to be quite similar to the alpha in terms of what you can do and the area that you can go in. But the introduction of combat is now new. So we're mainly talking boat combat. So cannon to monster is what we're looking at. We're hoping to do like traditional combat from boats as well, which means that like ideally you should be able to like ice barrage something from your boat, right? This is a significant like rework that is needed to actually make that work, and it might not look like that because if everything works as intended, it will just work. It shouldn't feel any different, but currently, as of right now at least, that bit doesn't work, so that needs a bit more work, and that's only between player and NPC. So if we want player to player, that needs more work. If we want boat or player boat to enemy boat, that needs more work as well. So I think a natural first step is to obviously like get it working, player with cannon on boat versus monster on sea without boat, right? And then the next step would be, okay, can we do player boat to NPC boat? And then eventually, can we do player boat versus player boat?
Thank you for that explanation, Elena. What were some of the key changes made to sailing post-alpha? Does anybody want to run through this? I have a little bit written up here, but
yeah, I can run through some of this. First thing to say is we're really, really pleased with the alpha feedback. I mean, so much of it was positive, and it was really just, I think, very nice to hear just so much work's gone obviously into the skill, to know that for the most part what we've done is resonated with the community, so that's really good. But obviously there are smaller bits and pieces that we wanted to address and change as a result of it. There's various mapping issues. You know, we saw loads of different posts of boats stuck up rivers and all of this sort of stuff. So, you know, we've got the reverse option, but obviously ideally people aren't getting stuck. So like we are going to obviously try and address as many of those as possible. The biggest change obviously with the beta is there's just more features. Combat and crew are going to be the main things we're looking to get feedback on. A lot of people were, port tasks is the same thing again and again and again. It needs more variety. Obviously, with the introduction of combat, we're able to finally bring you maybe your first bounty tasks. So that'll be a little bit of variety there. People also talked about loading and unloading your cargo as maybe sometimes a little tedious. Crewmates is something we believe will be a big help for that as well. So we'll see what you think when you get your hand on that. And also like just long journeys, maybe very samey, the same thing again and again. We do also want to introduce further environment design, different sea mechanics, and also maybe some chance encounters. So this is the sort of stuff we're looking at and want to address there as well. Also streamlining some of the charting tools, and make sure that's easy enough to play with and makes sense for obtaining them, understanding how to use them, and so on. So even like a tutorialing aspect is important to get right.
Fantastic, thank you, Kieren. How did you guys just find the alpha, by the way? I didn't get to ask, but were you pleased? Were you happy with the response that we got?
I think a lot of people were very skeptical, and I think that's very fair because when you start talking about sailing, you're talking about big ideas and kind of trying to explain it, and then it's 10 blogs in a row of just trying to explain design to players, and they're trying to like figure it out and wrap their head, and most people kind of have the right idea, but people just rightly so don't know what to expect. The alpha was fantastic. It just sort of setting that sort of bar across, like everyone's now right back to being on the same page again. Rocking my monitor as I talk, but yeah, like we're all on the same page again. We all know exactly what boats are, how they move. I think it's pretty well understood that sailing is happening on the open world and you're not in instances. That was like a misconception you still see, but has been substantially reduced. And I think just in all, players seem to indicate that it was way better than they expected it to be. I think some of the highest praise I saw was, yeah, it's kind of janky, but like in a good old school janky kind of way. And that's kind of what we're always trying to accomplish with all of our content. We're not going to be buttery smooth, UE5, kind of levels of content, but we're looking for a bit of charm. We're looking for it to feel good. And I think there was a lot of praise to it being quite intuitive as well, which was a big thing we spent a lot of time working on. The amount of so many movement iterations of boats, and should we do this and should we do that, and more rounds of survey and playtesting. So it was just a massive sigh of relief from like me personally, and I know a lot of the team, to just suddenly see like actually players liking what we've done, which proves that everything worked. By the way, it proved that all the NDA players that we had, and then all the parsec testing and rotating in new players and experienced players and fresh faces, all of that hard work kind of just worked.
And thank you for all of the positivity in the chat as well that I can see. Like I can definitely see there is some constructive comments as well, so thank you, chat, for being open-minded about that. I've taken learnings as well from the alpha, specifically that the survey needs to be more widely known or shouted out so that more people can take part in it and let us know their feedback. So definitely taken on board there. And I'm really, really happy to see, the amount of people that have said, I went into it skeptical, but actually I was pleasantly surprised. Like that's exactly why we spent so long kind of working on this alpha, making sure that players had the chance to test the content before we wanted to start having these conversations about polling. Like we wanted to make sure that players had the chance to experience sailing, know exactly what it is, what the skill involves, before we then go on to looking at the reward space. And generally speaking, I think that was the right call, because when you're talking about designing a new skill, it's really hard to get your head around it from just blogs or just videos. I think players are the best at what they do, which is playing the game. And yeah, we needed to make sure that you guys had the chance to do that before we started talking about all of this extra stuff on top, like the islands, the content on the islands, all of that stuff. So yeah, I'm really excited for the beta because it's just going to be even more content for you guys to try.
I was really sorry. Go on, Husky.
I was just like completely echo exactly what Modlight had said there, right? I've seen some people say in the blogs, this isn't sailing content. I'm like, yeah, correct. This stuff isn't sailing content. This is stuff on islands. We spent the entire year and more trying to get across, like leading to the alpha, to really show players what is sailing content. Okay, we've got through that. Now we can start talking about the traditional content.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I'm most happy about from the alpha, is just that all of these systems that we were testing out and trying different iterations of were finally validated. And now we know for sure that like boat movement, yeah, that works. Like as a core system, the way we have it implemented, that works. And now we can play around with different speeds. We can play around with like, islands and that kind of stuff. Like we can focus on the more traditional content that is our bread and butter. Like that's what we make all the time, right? So like the hard part is done, and we can focus on the exciting stuff now, which is really, really nice.
Fabulous. Are we going to be beta testing the things that we are polling right now? So, for example, Great Conch, deep sea trawling, things like that?
I think it's a case of like, if we are pulling like a new mining spot, and you know the basic bread and butter content you've already got, we don't feel the same necessity to beta test it because we know you're familiar with a lot of that stuff. But when it comes to more new mechanics that are more core to sailing itself, there's a real need for us to verify what we're doing and making sure we're getting the input from the player, from all of you. And overall, I have a sense of not wanting to spoil the whole skill and everything that comes with it. So I'm also being mindful of that. But obviously, we've got to take the right balance and making sure it's A, it's right for the game, and you guys have a chance to say so. B, we put the focus and attention on the most important aspects of the skill. You know, no one has yet, other than us internally, is publicly being able to get their hands on a ship and see how does it feel to fire a cannon at a creature in the water, right? This is fundamentally new. We've never done this before. It's so important we give that a go and make sure it's right. The same for all the other things, like obviously the navigation that's come in the alpha and so on and so on. So that's where the focus is. So it's not like necessarily a hard and fast, literally everything that's being pulled, literally everything that's not being pulled and so on. But the attention needs to go on the stuff that warrants and needs that input.
I would agree with that. Will there be new music tracks unlocked with sailing?
Of course there will.
Yes.
I really, really, really hope there's Sea Shanty 3, like, so much.
Fingers crossed.
Very sorry if you're a sailing hater, but a music cape enjoyer, you are still going to have to do some stuff to get your music cape back.
Hopefully they won't mind. How much control do players have over their crew? Can they decide on their outfit?
So for now, it's more of a functional control. We wanted to make sure that players who don't have friends don't feel too bad about it, essentially. If you're out sailing and you don't have other friends on the boat, we wanted to make sure that, you know, you can still play at a reasonable pace, as well as give you a bit of an extra level of progression almost. Like as you level up sailing, you get access to more crewmates, and the crewmates can do different stuff on your boat. So initially it's going to be more of a functional pass, but I could definitely see that being made into more of a cosmetic one over time, right? Like cosmetics tend to be the way that we kind of create more stretch goals and stuff over time. So I could definitely see it expanding into that, but for launch I wouldn't expect to.
Awesome. Can players expect to see graphical changes to water with the introduction of sailing? This was something that we addressed in the previous blog. So this was the sailing alpha results blog. Do you guys want me to cover that, or does anybody here want to cover this one?
I can go for it, like.
All right, cool. So I'm going to be shameless here, and I'm just going to repeat exactly what we said in the blog, because I don't really want to like give different information to what we posted in the blog. So we said in the blog, as we showcase at the RuneFest Summit, we'll be releasing HD graphics with our client later this year. Our HD mode includes updated HD water visuals, which provides additional graphical fidelity for those on mobile, Steam, or using our official client. If all goes well, this is the big if, our aim is to release official HD this summer. But this is a complex technical project. We're rolling it out cautiously to ensure everything goes smoothly, and we know that many players will want to continue using RuneLite, so we'll aim to use improvements that we described in the Sailing Alpha Results blog to make the water feel alive just generally. Like, we have feedback on the water regardless, like the stuff that we mentioned earlier, where we need to make it feel a bit more interesting on long journeys, maybe adding a few potential rapids, etc. So we want to make sure that it's a good product just regardless, like on Java. But it is a really cool ambition, and I think it's just a bit of caution to have two major technical projects trying to couple them together. We can't guarantee it, but we know that there's a real big interest there. One thing I also wanted to mention was that in our latest blog, like the poll blog, we have a section that outlines hazardous waters You have to scroll down quite a bit in the blog, but it will explain sort of very subtle changes to the water on the world map, for example, to show you where the hazardous waters are going to be. And we have discussed that sort of with our NDA group, but this was the first time that we really showed it to the wider community. And I feel like the world map got a lot of positivity just from what we showed. But yeah, let us know your feedback on that. And you'll be able to see that as well in the beta. Right. Are there any plans to add sailing random events, i.e. your ship has run ashore and it brings you to an evil Bob-style island where things are funky and backwards?
Should we just say to keep an eye out for the beta? Or do we want to get more clarity than that?
Well, we mentioned it briefly earlier. First of all, I really like that. What's my camera doing? There we go. I really like the suggestion. That's a really creative one. We mentioned it briefly earlier as part of the feedback that we're addressing from the alpha, because people said that, you know, going from A to B can be a bit tedious sometimes, and we're addressing that in multiple ways. One of them is going to be prominent in the beta. So yeah, as Husky said, keep an eye out for that.
Awesome. And the next question is, with the recent introduction of the GE tax rising, will sailing be a good source of gold sinking? For example, are we going to make some cosmetics cost a large amount of GP just to sink the gold?
I wouldn't say we have any designs that are specifically trying to be a gold sink, although sailing will inevitably sink a large amount of gold just on having new planks is like a big one. Obviously planks as a whole are just a general sinking gold. You know, you need to convert gold to convert a log to a plank. We have planks above mahogany that we'd look to introduce, and they cost more than mahogany does to convert, so that would surely be one. I'm all
really
for in general.
There was someone in the chat that said, why don't you literally just sink the gold, like, from your ship?
You want an anchor on your ship? It's constructed out of gold exclusively, and you will literally drop it to the bottom of the ocean.
Maybe it's
I think that stuff's
cheaper.
kind of cool. Fortunately, the condensed gold item is just a thing that exists that we can now just like use for construction stuff. I wouldn't say we've necessarily got anything in the build right now, but we could certainly look to.
Nice.
I have a gold trimmed boat, please.
Okay, so how will certain regions, such as Forgotten, Untamed, and Eastern... how will certain post-launch regions of the ocean be treated on launch? Are they going to be blocked off, creating dead ends, or will they just be empty sea that players sort of sail around in?
We're playing around with that right now, I think is the safest answer to sort of give. We had an implementation that was literally in our sprint review, where the idea we're having is not quite like rocks going around blocking walls. We've been trying to look for other solutions to that, mostly because it feels a bit artificial to just be like, there's a bunch of rocks at sea now and now they're gone. Like, obviously we can permit that for something like an alpha or beta, and it's still a solution if needs must, but the general idea is that when you look at the world map, you'll see that there's slightly different tints of colors to the ocean, and those represent hazardous water areas, similar to the storm that's going around Temperos, if you played in the alpha. And the idea is that, for those of you who actually went through this step, I know many didn't, you had to build an oak mast and sails to counter that hazard. And obviously that's just, you know, it's level 30 sailing, it's just having a strong enough sail to not be taken down by lightning. A lot of the hazardous water areas are probably going to look to have something a bit more bespoke. You know, I'm entering the like sun-baked seas near the desert, so I need like a source of water skins, like a facility on my boat that's built of water skins, like a very simple example. And the idea we've had is that if you just don't have that built, you just can't sail through there. Now, we had a very harsh implementation that we've experimented recently where your boat just stopped, but obviously that felt very mean, I guess, was a lot of the feedback we had, to just have your boat stop and suddenly you have to escape, and you didn't know that going into that colored sea would have that effect. So we're looking to see if we can look at other options for that, so we don't have a clear answer. But in general, the sea will exist, it will have not very much in it, and as a result we don't want you to sail around it until that content is released. And I think that's probably the best in-game way of doing it, because it just feels like the world exists and, oh, like, I don't know, like, the sea is too hot, I now need to have something to build to get past that, and I don't, that thing just doesn't exist in the game yet, but when it does, I'll be able to sail there. Feels like the best sort of, like, way to integrate it with the current systems, as opposed to, as I kind of mentioned earlier, arbitrarily just mapping down rocks.
Awesome. Thank you, Husky. I'm going to try and speed through these because we only have sort of like 4 or 5 more questions. So I feel like you answered that really well. Please jump in though, Elena and Kieren, if you just want to jump in. And right. So are there any desires for law parity between old school and RS3 regarding sailing?
A little bit. So when we first started looking at the world map for sailing, we looked at the RuneScape map and we went, okay, are there any places that we want to introduce that exist in RuneScape? Are there any places that we want to reserve in case we do want them, but they are in RuneScape now, but maybe not in old school yet? And are there places that we have that RuneScape don't? And how do we make sure that those all sort of align? At the same time, how do we also keep the door open for other things that RuneScape might have that we might want to do in the future? A key example there is stuff like the Eastern lands, right? Like Wushanko Island is quite popular, I believe, in RuneScape, and it looks amazing, but we're not going there on launch. But maybe in the future we might. So those are the kind of considerations that we had, at least, when looking at it. Beyond that, and potentially like naming some things to be to have a bit of parity, there's not too many things that we're taking from RuneScape in that sense. I think that the Unquiet Ocean is one that we got from them, though. Just the name of it.
Awesome. Are there limitations on which ships can navigate into which waters around the world?
I would say no, apart from what I described earlier with hazardous waters and needing a specific facility to counter, but we're not looking to say only this boat can build that type of counter. We initially had a design we might have shared during refinement, but has now since been scrapped. We played around with it for a while, where the idea in general was that you had deep seas for colossal boats, open seas for large boats, and shallow seas for small boats. You would have needed to match the boat up. And what we found in general was, first of all, that it didn't really make sense to punish your boat for being smaller. It's already punished for being smaller because it has less facilities. So moving slower in more dangerous seas where you're probably not going to have all the facilities anyway to deal with the threats felt like a double punishment. So we scaled that back. And then open seas kind of being a neutral ground didn't really change anyway. And the only one we're kind of roughly keeping is we like the idea of colossal boats not being able to sail in the sort of shallow sea areas, but we're also not really looking to release those on launch, I believe. I'd have to double check our plans. So then that becomes a kind of a moot point. So a lot of what players could expect on launch is you'll probably be able to take any boat anywhere, but if you remember the alpha, when we still had the old movement system that got a lot of negative feedback, and we were I think we had mod rock streaming. If you remember that far back, like a year ago, when we had that really massive boat that was literally I think it was a 6 by 16 boat or something obscene. We don't have any of those. So even though I say all boats will be able to sail anywhere, it's not like you're going to be seeing things of that scale around Port Sarin. Those could be things we look to solve in the future if we do introduce such boats. But we definitely want to make sure that we develop the things that we have for launch are just work before expanding on the sort of more complicated ones. And at that point, we might see things like shallow sea return. But for the most part, terms like shallow, open, and deep sea are really just, I guess, part of the environment more than anything that's functional. You'll see the gradient of the sea texture change slightly as you move towards land, just to indicate that you are getting closer to land, and it'll get darker as you move out to sea. But that's more of just a sort of environmental thing more than a functional one right now.
Thank you, Husky.
I think the only other thing I can think of where we do actually block access to some boats is just based off of size. So in the alpha, there was this charting point in the River Lum that only the little raft could reach. And that's obviously like blocking out the bigger boats because they just can't get up there. And I quite like that interaction because, as Husky said, that the raft is already sort of punished for being small because it doesn't have that many facility slots. But it having a niche use case of like actually being able to reach a couple of places that the other boats might not is actually really cool.
This is a really exciting question. I can't wait to ask it. Does the team plan to have raids integrate with sailing at any point?
Well, at any point is a different question too. If it's the next raid, I think I'd be quite happy saying like the next raid we're doing won't be a sailing one, but we all love this vision of the big like Fremenic longships going on a big sailing venture as a raid or something along those lines. Like, I think the fantasy of everything, oh my god, it is so exciting. But, you know, we mentioned at RuneFest, we're looking to do a raid in 2026. We're going to be, like, development in real terms, like, and actually fleshing out a design and so on will begin this year. It's just too soon to jump into the sailing fantasy yet, when sailing's not even in the game. It's not going through all the feedback changes and everything that might come after launch and so on. So, not yet. But hey, maybe not the next raid. Maybe the one after that. Who knows? But it is obviously really cool. And this is why, at the end of the day, this is one of the things that makes me so excited about having sailing in the game, because it's like, just from a fantasy perspective, from a theming perspective, it opens up a lot of different ideas for what we can do with the world, thematics, content, new areas, and so on. So it is going to be cool. But yeah, a bit more patience on that one, I'm afraid.
No, that's awesome. I'm really excited to see the chat sort of get involved in that. Yeah, thank you for still listening. We're literally like 1 hour, 30 minutes into the Q&A. Only 2 more questions that I'm going to ask, and then we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to start with this one. So did we explore procedurally generated islands with sailing?
We thought about it quite a bit. Like, we thought about this way back in early refinement, I will say, back before when we were still thinking about which 3 skills would we put to the players. And I think we discussed the idea of, you know, what did the original sailing vlogs look like, which was kind of like procedural content, you know, that you would go out and do and build your crew. It was kind of like, it feels like what they'd initially pitched to sailing back in the day was kind of like boat dungeoneering. And I've definitely seen some appeal for that ever since we've been talking about sailing, you know, where people think that idea would be really cool. The idea we ultimately settled on was, let's actually access the entire world. That felt different from the initial proposal and felt a lot more exciting in general. But that doesn't mean we've closed the door on the sort of procedurally generated stuff. It's just something we'd consider potentially happening later. I think the idea is, ooh, I really like exploring something, but exploring only has value once. So I want to be able to explore things a lot of times, but procedurally generated content isn't the same as exploring something that is bespoke and has charm. It's not like you'll randomly find an NPC there that has a really obscure item interaction that you need to figure out and adds to the story and depth of world. That's a very different kind of exploration than here's a start, here's an end goal, and then players optimize the hell out of getting to the end goal for every single layout as fast as possible. Which is kind of what dungeoneering ends up sort of being, and it's what that kind of ends up being. So maybe it's not a sailing dungeoneering, maybe it's some other type of procedurally generated thing that has like an exploration, like chart the entire island goal, but it still would get like, ultimately anything that's procedurally generated is created by an algorithm that has rules, you know, that players would figure out and document. So it becomes a very different kind of content. So while I'm not saying like we're opposed to it, it's something that could have general interest in the future. I remember speaking to someone internally, I can't remember who, but when we floated this idea back early in refinement of could we do this and what would it take, the answer I got was, unless you've got years of experience in doing procedurally generated stuff, like, you're never going to have the time to do this. You'll spend years and years refining, breaking it, taking it apart, putting it together again. And even then, like, would that just be one feature on a scale? It's like a huge investment that feels like what's more important is to get the sort of core framework of the skill in place first, and then evaluate that as a separate project later down the line, as opposed to something you just tack on to something that's already as massive as sailing.
What's particularly hard is making good proc gen stuff. Sure, we could generate an island, but what's the point? Why is that fun? Why is it interesting? It's those questions that become really difficult. And you might have experienced it in a lot of other games that do proc gen. It's so easy for it to just feel so shallow, and it doesn't really add that much to the game. Especially when you consider like how much it would actually cost development time-wise to go and make it happen. So, hence what Husky just said.
Awesome, thank you. That was a really comprehensive answer. I did try to mention it in the blog and sort of nod to it, but I really appreciate the additional context, and hopefully chat does as well. Right, my final question before we wrap up is, what are the team's plans to support sailing after it launches?
Well, I think that regardless, we're not releasing the entire ocean. That much has been made clear from the blog. So the fundamental player question will be, so what is there? When do I get access to it? And I feel like that sounds like it would be maybe not the highest priority, but like, you know, it's going to be one of the first questions people look at, just like when they see a black box like Menaphos was back in the day, like what's there? When are we going to fill it? I don't want to concretely say like what our production plans are, but fundamentally sailing is going to be another skill in the game that would likely be handled like any other skill. It's got some very obvious extensions of where it can go next, as opposed to something like, say, smithing, where we start to think like, okay, well, what can we actually next add to smithing? Is it another mini game, or is it some other thing instead? You know, I mean, maybe I should have chose a different skill, because smithing is the very obvious like smithing rework people keep talking about, right? But the idea in general is that like sailing has a lot of immediate answers to sort of solve, which might lend itself more to meeting player expectations, I suppose, as opposed to another skill which is more experimental. But yeah, ultimately it'll just be treated like any other skill. We'd certainly like to. We're trying to. A lot of our questions when we've said, okay, well, what's this in the futures? We're kind of trying to set up what those things kind of are. You know, we'll still have loose design pages of, okay, we're not releasing this, but this is kind of what we expect to be there, which means the things that you are exploring can inform that in an intuitive and narrative way. So yeah, I hope that kind of makes sense.
We've set aside significant amount of time as well post-launch to just like do more. And even though we don't know exactly what more is just yet, I think a lot of that will be dependent on what the players want, right? Like, say sailing comes out tomorrow, right? Let's imagine sailing goes out tomorrow.
I'll try.
Not confirmed, Chad.
Yeah, please don't hold me to that. But let's all just imagine that sailing comes out tomorrow, and then tomorrow my job will be monitoring that update, making sure everything goes smoothly. But the day after, I'm like, okay, what do the players want me to do next? Like, what are their biggest gripes with the update? What do they want more of? What do they want less of? Like, what are we going to change here? No, sailing's not coming tomorrow. It's not confirmed. Calm down, chat.
So much hype.
But yeah, like that's how we would approach it, like in the immediate term. But I think also like longer term, we probably have like one or two things that would probably prioritize highly. But largely, it will be dependent on just what the community wants. And one thing we've also been talking about a bit is we want a community-designed island at some point. But we also know that the best way for you, the community, to figure out what would actually fit in the game is when you have the whole context of what sailing is and all the islands that you can access. Only then can you best say what new island to introduce, right? So that's also something that we're looking to do post-launch. We just don't know like the exact order of things to come yet.
Yeah, and I love that we're able to be agile and flexible in terms of what the community wants and needs. So yeah, I think that's a really big W for the community, the fact that we are going to keep their interests in mind. Right, I think that's everything. So do you guys just generally want to add anything before we wrap up and go through some announcements?
Make sure to vote in the poll. It's live right now for some of the islands. So yeah, go check that out.
Yes, please vote, have your say, and yeah, we really appreciate you guys tuning in, especially as well, like the fact that chat has been so lovely. Like, I know there's been a couple of debates in the chat, but overall you've been really like constructive and lovely, and we love to see it.
I think I would just shout out the next blog as well. It'll still be a bit off. We're still working through some of the details, but out of the 3 blogs that we've said we're going to talk about, blog and poll, I think that's certainly the meatiest, juiciest blog that tackles a lot of what these resources are, what they do, how it's going to affect your journey. So that'll be something I'm incredibly excited to sort of like sink my teeth into, all that feedback that comes from that.
Awesome. And Kieren, what about yourself? What would you like to shout
Just
out?
thank you so much for the endless passion and interest in what we're doing with sailing. It really will be a big day in Old School when it launches, and obviously we're determined to get it right, and we understand that there's so much care for us to nail this, and that's what we're going to do.
We will. We absolutely will. All right, I'm going to wrap up with some announcements. So !blog, if you haven't read the latest sailing blog, please go take a read. The poll is live now. It will be live until June the 9th. !poll for the same info. Discord links you to the sailing Discord. We're going to actually have a sailing Discord stage tomorrow where you actually get to be able to like raise your hand and have the opportunity to ask questions directly yourself. With the dev team. DMM, Deadman All Stars is back for another season, so you can watch your favorite creators from May the 30th to June the 8th. The finale is going to be streamed on our channel. And merch for the Wise Old Man and Gnome Child keyrings. Finally, just a reminder, RuneScape and Old School RuneScape is going to be taken offline for 5 hours for scheduled maintenance tomorrow. We're moving our backend services to a different data center. This has been updated on the game status page, but I'm just giving you guys a heads up now. Get round to all those chores you've been putting off. Make sure to schedule your showers in. I don't know what else.
It's like a month's worth of showers in one 5-hour session, you know.
It's time to go for your weekly shop. Like, it's the best time for it.
Shop, you know? Yes, absolutely. But yeah, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate the positivity in the chat today. I know some of you guys like still have concerns, but you know, we're here to address them in our Q&As. We're going to be as transparent as possible. Make sure to join the Discord as well for more info. Okay, have a great day. We'll see you soon. And thank you for a wonderful stream, guys. Bye.
Bye.